myself. Oh no, give me that sound. Oh, I gotta go like Cobain. 8 years to the grave, gone insane. My blood got propane. How you gon' go and throw my name with shame? Already cross-faded, making it to the disco. I hate it, and you know how this goes. You framed it, picture painted in my room. This that real life shit, not on Zoom. Got the scene in it.
About Brent. Brent's cool.
Make sure you subscribe to JerCrispy.
He a cool dude, you know, man, a cool dude. So let's go learn about Brent.
All before the age of 30,
Brent
Faiyaz went from recording songs in his bedroom to becoming one of the most successful independent artists
pause
of
too.
life. But before the platinum records and billions of streams,
pause too. Anywho, what's up, y'all? It's host most. That's the most. JerCrispy. Host of That's the Most. JerCrispy. Welcome back to another video. The insane true story about Brent. My nigga Brent. Freezy? What is it? I'm sorry, Brent, if I say your name wrong, dog. Faiyaz? I probably said your name wrong as hell. But I'm sorry, bro. But this is the true story. I finally saw this on my timeline for YouTube. I was like, man, look, let me go ahead and watch this. I already liked it. Put the like, and I was like, man, we're going to react to this, bro. It's about Brent. I love Brent music. I remember back then, me and my brother, like Stoner or Stony, or Soner, yeah, Soner, like not Stoner, like SONDER, Stony, yeah, Stony or something like that. We thought that was somebody else. Whole time it was him, bro, and he had like a tattoo on his head. It was like an old group that he used to be in or something like that, and all that. But let's get it.
Before the age of 30, Brent Faiyaz went from recording songs in his bedroom to becoming one of the most successful independent artists alive.
That's gonna be me someday.
But before the platinum records and billions of streams, he had to push through years of struggle, bad deals, hard jobs, having his talents under-recognized by the biggest names in music. If I'm being honest, I was messing up on every level in my life growing up. Whether it was in school or in my jobs, I was always distracted by my love of music. But eventually, he became a star on his own terms. And this is the story of how a kid from Maryland built his own empire, refused to compromise, and achieved a type of success that almost no one ever has, all while becoming one of the few artists to never sell his soul.
Yeah.
An industry designed to step up
and
strangle most of its artists. How did Brent Faiyaz become one of the few artists around today who's actually achieved artistic freedom? As always, if you're interested in more of my creations, my brand Spirit World is currently 20% off all pieces for our spring sale. He was the youngest of 3 brothers, and he was raised in a household shaped by discipline and structure, with his mother and his father both being educators that believed in a strict parenting style. And so, from an early age, he was surrounded by high expectations, but even during his childhood, his mind started drifting towards a different path. His mother was the first person to notice his natural inclination towards creativity. Initially, his passion was visual art. During a later interview, she talked about how Brent had a natural talent for drawing buildings at the age of 5 years. But not long after that, Brent's mother gifted him a keyboard, and unlike most kids who might treat it like a toy, he became intensely fixated on making sounds and experimenting with melodies. And as this little kid in Maryland grew up, living in the mid-2000s before internet music streaming, he started to build a CD collection, becoming more and more interested in artists like Lauryn Hill, D'Angelo, and Alicia Keys.
Yeah.
For most kids, that would have just been a hobby, sitting in his room listening to stuff he liked, but for him, it was more. He was spending his time poring over the liner notes, obsessing over the names behind making the albums, piecing together the process of making records in his own way. And after his brother introduced him to Timbaland, Brent became obsessed with emulating his musical heroes and producing his own material as well. And the more music I listened to and the more I practiced, I kept progressing. I started listening to music, and from paying so much attention, I was hearing things that no one else did. He even had his own so-called home studio, a computer set up with a USB mic and a basic DAW, and at the same time, his parents put him in vocal lessons after school. And so when he was finally able to start making his own instrumentals like this, he quickly made it into a local business where he would produce beats for other people in the DMV area.
Being from Maryland is like everybody for the most part is like doing their own thing, or like, I don't know, it's real competitive. I think a lot of it comes from it being like an area with a lot of schools and a lot of sports. So
before long, people were stopping by the house to listen to and buy beats from him. And pretty quickly, Brent almost unintentionally built up a music scene in his local Maryland area.
I was making money selling beats like in high school, middle school. But that's like a lot of how I got my friends like when I was young. Like it'd be like grown motherfuckers coming to the house like to get beats off me and shit. My parents were like, who are these grown adults coming by the house like to Like, what is this going on? Like, people like my music.
But as time went on, as he got older and the level of responsibility and maturity that was expected of someone his age would go up, his parents were growing increasingly unhappy with his interest in music. And with both of his parents dedicating their careers to education and teaching, it makes sense. Being so invested in music and creativity, it was starting to hurt his grades pretty badly to be that focused on something else. And Brent was consistently doing so poorly in school that he actually failed the 9th grade altogether because he wouldn't stop working on music instead of doing his schoolwork. Years later, Brent said, "My most embarrassing high school moment would have to be failing the 9th grade because everybody knew about it. Luckily, I ended up graduating on time from taking night school, but I had to be in English class with everyone younger than me." But even as his obsession with music was starting to...
Hey, bro, you ain't the only one in that boat, bro. When I ain't failed 9th grade, bro. But like sitting in class with young dudes and young females and all that, bro. I was a whole junior and they were sophomores. Biology class, junior year, bro. Never again in my life will do that again.
Cause real negative consequences in his life, Brent was still looking for ways to make moves, no matter what else was going on around him.
I always liked it. Like, I always just enjoyed making music. But I think it wasn't until I got maybe around like high school, like I started getting really good. Like, I started being able to make anything I heard. Like, I was kind of able to pick records apart. That was the first thing. Like, damn, I could pick that apart and find out everything that was in there and make that shit. And this when I was like 14, you know what I'm saying? So then from there, I'm just like, man, let me just put out these tapes, apply that shit to my own shit.
A quote from Vogue says, his parents weren't always understanding of his dreams. They would say, "Come on now, be realistic." And their concerns, he admitted, may have been warranted. If I'm being honest, I was messing up on every level in my life growing up. Whether it was in school or in my jobs, I was always distracted by my love of music. Eventually though, his teenage obsession with music started manifesting into something real. After years of listening, reading, and practicing as much as he possibly could, he started his own collective with a friend from high school. So Brent founded this first creative collective, Lost Kids, in 2009 when he was around 14 or 15. And after starting the Lost Kids collective, Brent's next move would be obviously to start dropping and promoting his own official music for the first time. But before he could actually achieve recognition or success, he would of course also have to make it through high school itself. Young Brent's obsession with music finally came to life with Sunset Avenue, which he dropped in August of 2012 when he was about 17 years old. He dropped it under the Lost Kids label, although it really obviously wasn't under any label because it was just a mixtape that he uploaded to the internet from his house. This was the first time though that Christopher Brent Wood went by Brent Faiyaz.
Oh, Faiyaz, Brent Faiyaz.
An idea he got from a friend at school. But there are a lot of moments on Sunset Avenue that are shockingly good. When Brent says in interviews that he had a talent for making music from a young age, he isn't lying. The intro track sounds like it came straight out of a big budget, polished R&B album with a gorgeous piano intro that transitions from dreamy synths and drums that are definitely inspired by the Toronto sound to something that almost sounds like it could have fit in the OST for Uncut Gems with a MIDI chorus and deep, dreamy, twinkling chords. Honestly, this mixtape is pretty beautiful. Obviously though, the mixing is pretty bad, the mastering isn't all that good, it doesn't have a very lush, deep sound, but it was made by a kid. There's very little information available online about this project at all. I mean, the YouTube uploads of this mixtape have like 4,000 or 5,000 views per song, if that. Even some of the most dedicated Brent Faiyaz fans aren't tapped into Sunset Avenue. But beyond the moody, atmospheric vibes, Brent's main focus for vocals was rapping. And maybe it's the mixing or just the fact that he was 16 years old, but it kind of almost does sound like he was trying to be quiet while he was recording this. Like he didn't want to bother his family in the next room or something like that. Maybe though he just hadn't found his voice yet. But basically, the vibe and the production of this project sounds a lot more fleshed out than Brent himself on the mic. And so overall, it does feel like something is missing. But in one of the last songs, August 5th, Brent decided to sing, and the vocals sound almost alien, like an uncredited feature by someone else when compared to his rapping. But it is him singing, and it ended up being one of the mixtape's strongest moments. It offers a pretty crazy glimpse into the artist he would later become in the middle of an unpolished first mixtape he made in high school. In another interview with Billboard, he reflected on trying to shift his parents' negative perception of his dreams and what it was like for him making stuff like this back then. Faiyaz's parents had once pushed him to attend college, but eventually that morphed into them asking, "Can you please just graduate high school?" He recalls with a chuckle saying, "My grades were so bad. I could do music all day, every day, but if it's not bringing money into the house, then you need a plan B or a plan C. But music was all I wanted to do, so I kind of had no choice but to prove them wrong." Brent did eventually graduate, but not without another major interruption. When he was still in school, his mom landed a better job at a college in North Carolina, which meant moving in the 12th grade. He left behind the community he built in Howard County and started over in Charlotte, and it was a major adjustment. And he did finish high school, but his parents were still skeptical about his ambitions, and they insisted that he continue his education further.
Man, who took this picture, bro? Hey, this shit kind of clean as hell. Whoever took this picture is kind of clean as hell. That nigga dark as a bit. I only could make that joke because I'm dark myself, bro.
I don't even really think I can emphasize this enough, but Brent Faiyaz as a kid truly believed his music had potential. Obviously, though, his more traditional, conservative type parents didn't. But of course, he still had to follow their rules while he was living in their house. But after an endless back and forth, they did agree that he could have a gap year, a year after high school but before college, to do whatever he wanted and pursue his dreams. The quote says, after lengthy discussions, Wood said that she and her husband settled on a compromise. Brent could have 1 year to focus solely on music. If he hadn't made significant progress within that time frame, he would have to go back to academics. But even though they made this deal for him to be allowed to pursue his passions, it wouldn't be that long before he was kicked out of the house entirely anyway. I moved out at 18 because my family got tired of me making so much noise with my recording. My father didn't like that shit, so I had to go. I had to thug it out. Just to keep a roof over his head, he ended up working at a local Dunkin' Donuts and later in the supermarket deli department.
I was like 18, 19, like with my brother. I was living in Charlotte. That was the grind, man. Just like washing my work clothes in the sink and like shaking roaches off my shoes and shit before I put them on, type of thing.
In fact, Brent was so obsessed with his goals at the
It be like that though. It be like that sometimes. So I ain't even gonna hold you, bro. Shoot, bro. Man. It happened to a nigga like me before, man. Had to shake off your shoes before the roaches, man. Not watching the sink, but I had to go use somebody else wash it, bro. Yeah, it be like that though.
I'm not joking. Brent Faiyaz, the guy with a Grammy nomination and multiple platinum releases, started out as the coworker at your job that plays SoundCloud raps out of his phone and never stops talking about getting famous.
In my work uniform, like, listen, like, I'm trying to tell you, I'm about to be really lit. I know a lot of niggas, I'm doing a lot of cool things. I don't flex it, but this is something that I'm telling you. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people don't really see it at the time.
But those same songs were the exact ones that would take him out of the struggle and make him a rising star before long. Because at the end of 2013, like a month after he turned 18, Brent dropped his second project, the Black Child EP. With 9 songs, all self-produced, it was the strongest music he had come up with yet. And once again, he had a deep vision for this project, far beyond the age he was at the time, having crafted an atmospheric, elevated sound even better than Sunset Avenue. And as it was getting more and more streams, Brent received a completely unexpected cosign from the OVO affiliate blogger Tommy Campos, who shared Brent's music on his Tumblr page. Back then, an endorsement like this was basically like having your song played by Kai Cenat on Twitch. And so pretty quickly, Brent started getting attention from labels and managers who saw potential in his music. But it wasn't until a DM from a guy named Ty Baisden that Brent would find his first true mentor and the person who would help him turn his vision into a reality. Brent later said, he hit me randomly in a DM back when I was doing singing and rapping at the same time. He started saying stuff like, you know, you're doing this right and this wrong and this right and this is wrong. And I was thinking, who even are you? But then I started listening to him and he started helping with blogs and premieres and stuff. And this was back in 2013 when blogs were basically everything.
When I was still rapping, I was like rapping and singing. I was doing both like later on towards the end. And I never really had nobody reach out, you know, to like manage me or take my career to the next level. And the one manager I got now is one of the first managers to ever reach out and say he really wanted to work with me. You know? He was like, man, first thing you need to do is stop all that rapping shit. I was like, what you mean? You feel me? Like, I'm a rapper. He was like, nah, bro, there's too many rappers out there.
But even though Brent didn't understand yet, it would quickly become one of the most important things anyone had ever said to him. He made the jump and went to LA basically without any money.
See, they got the tattoo right there. That's the tattoo I'm talking about. SONDER. I didn't even know he had that on his forehead.
He would often return to the DMV area to work at other jobs. But in January of 2016, he moved to LA full-time at 21 years old. Like most people who are trying to make it in music, Brent was at first fixated on getting signed to a label to prove himself as an artist. I mean, that's how it is. That's how it always has been. Getting signed to a major label is a huge sign of success. It makes you feel like you've made it. And so when Brent went to LA, he explored every option. He even posed as his own A&R to get his music listened to by labels. In the years after the Black Child EP, Brent and Ty had countless meetings with labels. They talked to Interscope, Atlantic Records, RCA. Even at one point, they ended up having a meeting with L.A. Reid, the executive known for signing Usher, Outkast, and TLC, among many others.
Hey, damn.
We had some really great meetings. We met with L.A. Reid, and L.A. said that he loved Brent, and that was the only meeting where anyone actually allowed him to sing in an office setting, and we do respect him and what he did for R&B music. But then I got the deal proposal, and I'm like, wait a minute. This is not a good deal. That's the problem. Those types of interactions are what led us to decide ultimately on being independent. People will say that's how it goes in the business. They send you the contract and you have to negotiate, but that's not what we wanted. Ty went and spoke to Troy Carter, a former manager of people like Lady Gaga and a tech investor at Spotify, and he asked him for advice. What Troy told Ty was to not approach labels at all, but instead that he should pursue Brent's career completely independently. It was advice that made a lot of sense, and it would give them a ton of freedom if they could do it, but it sounded much easier said than done. And so Troy's advice put Brent and Ty at a confusing crossroads. They could go for a major label deal, cashing in on a big advance and playing by the industry's rules, or they could forge their own path. They could go through the uncertainty and the risk of being independent, but maybe they'd be able to build a legacy that would outlast the quick payday from a greedy label in the end.
I look at everything from 100% of a pie. So when people say, well, industry standard for a new artist is a 18% royalty, and they're gonna say 18% royalty is very high, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, 18% out of 100?
What are you doing getting 82% of my music? You know what I mean? Like, that stuff just don't make no sense.
Obviously, the label will, in most cases, help you develop your career faster than you could otherwise, helping pay for production costs, marketing, and everything. But it's also the case that many artists get trapped in a cycle of debt with their label, and in most, if not all cases, it's in the label's best interest to get artists hooked and coming back for more over and over, and sometimes even forcing them to release music they otherwise don't want to keep up with their contractual obligations.
Exactly.
I personally know multiple people who have been screwed over by bad record deals. It literally happened to Frank Ocean and Taylor Swift. Those are two of the biggest artists of the last generation, and they both had horrible experiences with their label. And so that type of success, where everything you make is ultimately owned by someone else, wasn't something that Brent and Ty were willing to accept. They were ready to risk it all and be completely on their own and maybe not become successful rather than not be able to make their own decisions. But that wasn't an easy thing to decide on. I mean, obviously, being independent sounds way better, but there's a good reason why so many artists do take the record deal, even if it doesn't make sense in the long term. It's impossibly expensive to start recording professionally, not even to mention promoting and marketing your work costs even more, and it would take a few more years and a lot of work before Brent achieved any mainstream recognition. Here's a quote from an article from 2022. Inspired by Chance the Rapper's grassroots independent movement, Brent and his manager Ty Baisden built their own independent following through extensive touring and gaming the math of streaming services like Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. He would later say about the early years, it was slow growth being independent. We were still broke for a long time. I didn't really start making real money until 3 years ago. But with Ty's help, Brent was able to organically build a real and loyal, if small, cult fan base. But by taking a longer route, they ensured that he would receive all the revenue from his hard work once his career did take off. They realized pretty quickly that with Brent having been producing, recording, writing his own music since he was a kid, experience wasn't going to be the issue. But they still did need a distribution partner. Unlike record labels, music publishers don't control an artist's master recordings. Instead, they manage the rights to lyrics, instrumentals. Most of the time, a deal with a publishing group is a win-win for everyone involved. With a publishing deal, whenever Brent's music is played at the Super Bowl, in a club, in a gym, covered on YouTube, or even featured in a movie, they'll help him collect the royalties for that. And even though the individual fees might be small, they accumulate across numerous revenue streams, making publishing one of the most profitable aspects of the music business in total. Being an independent artist, this type of deal would be a hugely important way for Brent and Ty to keep their growth sustainable, bringing them income they wouldn't have otherwise. And so one of the first publishers they approached was Pulse Music Group, who immediately saw potential in Brent and signed him to their agency in 2016.
I moved out to LA, stayed out there for maybe a couple months before I signed my first publishing deal, and then everything started rolling after that. That's the first time my parents actually saw that you could make a living off doing something that you love to do versus applying for a job and getting paid that way.
His deal with Pulse was most likely only involving a small percentage of his publishing, with them maybe taking
10%. Ain't that bad.
Helping him secure commercial placements, marketing opportunities, and more royalties overall.
All right.
Again, though, he was still independent. This isn't a record label. The relationship with a publisher like Pulse is a lot more like they're helping manage him. They're taking a cut of the opportunities that they bring to him. The opposite of the label, which would be more like giving Brent money and then making him work to pay it back later.
So there's no advance.
What the fuck? But it's gonna take me a little minute to add all that shit.
But you're making a lot more than the average artist is.
Yeah.
And so are you? Do you have a songwriting deal? You own that too.
I got publishing deal.
You go, but so you. This is crazy.
Yeah, I own my publishing deal. Yeah.
You own your publishing.
Yes, indeed.
How did you come up to understand to own and control all your shit? Because nobody gets this far owning all this shit.
That's my business partner, man. That's Ty Bazin. It's like having big homies around that give you, hey man, you got some talent. That's what you need to do. Man.
Around this time in 2016, Brent and Ty were strategizing on how to build Brent's career independently. Brent had a little hype on SoundCloud and blogs, and I think people who were into underground music might know who he was, but even then, he had barely started to even upload music to streaming platforms, with only a couple of songs on Spotify from back then. But not long after he signed his distribution deal, his first official studio project, AM Paradox, was finally released on his 21st birthday in September of 2016. And it was a massive step forward for Brent as an artist. The instrumentals, although they were no longer entirely self-produced, still had the atmospheric and murky vibe, but the big difference on this project is Brent's voice. He was no longer rapping with dry, quiet vocals and short, awkward flows. On AM Paradox, he's singing some of the most hypnotic, soulful vocals you'll ever hear. And while the song Poison would later be certified platinum, this EP started out pretty slowly. You can use the Internet Archive to see that in August of 2016, a couple weeks before he dropped this, Brent Faiyaz had just over 1,000 Instagram followers.
Damn.
At this point, Brent Faiyaz was still grinding with no guarantee of success. He was putting in the work because of his passion rather than any fame or fortune he hadn't yet achieved. When you look up reviews for AM Paradox back then, there's a Reddit post about this EP, it has no comments. Not a lot of people knew who Brent was back then. He was playing venues in Chicago that had a capacity for maybe 200 people. His interviews or promo back then are basically non-existent outside of tiny blog articles. But it didn't really matter if the album blew up overnight, because all the effort he was putting into networking, recording, pushing forward was about to pay off anyway. Because just a couple months after he dropped that AM Paradox EP, Brent would be featured on the hook for a Gold Link song called Crew. And that song would be nominated for a Grammy, it would reach over 600 million Spotify streams, and it would be certified 8 times platinum. And that is what truly brought him into the eye of the mainstream, with the song blowing up massively on social media. Talking about Brent on Crew, Billboard would say, there wasn't a catchier sung hook in all of 2017. And so basically, after the unprecedented success of Crew, Brent's career exploded. People were suddenly desperate to find out exactly who he was, what he was up to, and they were diving into his back catalog of music, with many of his already released songs becoming cult classics among this growing fan base.
I guess like I'm naturally like an introvert, so I just be like cooling. So like it's just getting used to like people knowing me before I actually like know who they are, so stuff like that. So if anything, it's just like walking down the street and if somebody's looking at me, I'm thinking like I don't know what the you know what I'm saying, like like regular shit, and then like I realize like oh like I'm a recording artist, like so it's just like always putting that first all the time.
In a lot of ways, it was almost like his lack of public profile and major label affiliation made the mystique around him even more powerful. And so the independent grind he had been on, making the best music he could without selling out and just trying to get by, it had now all paid off. Still though, the work was far from over. When asked about how he felt with such a big hit at just 22 years old, Brent would say, "It's cool, but I don't really focus much on it. I'd rather do my own record that's moving like that instead." But AM Paradox and the songs from that project like Poison weren't the only songs by Brent that started getting big attention after the success of Crew. Because while he was living and working in LA in 2016, Brent was introduced to 2 producers called Deepat and Atu, and it wasn't long before they became an essential part of his creative process, helping create the sound that later made him a star.
But from there, I was releasing music on SoundCloud. My stuff started gaining like a little bit of traction when I started singing, because before then I was rapping. Deepat reached out to me. Him and Atu were part of Selection. And they said they wanted to work with me, so we got in the studio when they came out to LA, and that's how sounding happened from there.
While Deepat had previously produced for The Weeknd after The Weeknd.
Oh, so that's what happened, right? So that's how he got that. Okay. Cool. Now everything clicking up.
Either him or Atu were hugely well-known figures, kind of like Brent. But once they got in the studio with him, both of them would unlock creative potential like they never had before. D-Pat later said to Billboard, "I started out as a solo beat maker, and there was this movement, collective of DJs and producers called Selection, and we were preparing for a DJ set or something, and Atu randomly put on a song from SoundCloud, and Brent's song came up after it. And as soon as it started, I think he only had 2 or 3 songs out at the time in 2015, but we heard his voice and we were like, whoa, who is this? And I'm not saying we were big or anything, but we had a few followers, and he agreed to meet with us, and we had a couple of sessions. Because in addition to helping him produce AM Paradox, they also formed a band called Sonder, releasing a project called Into that quickly grew its own cult fan base as Brent go viral. Songs like Too Fast and Care are still classics to this day, and the band's name came from the tattoo that Brent has over his right eyebrow, a neologism invented by a blogger who describes it as the realization that every individual passing by has their own life that's just as vivid and complex as yours. Everybody that you come across and walk past has their own story. And despite, or maybe even because of the kind of mysterious personas that they continued to cultivate at his time with this kind of weird, anonymous, mysterious group called Sonder, that also added to Brent's mythology, and it only made him even more intriguing than before to his quickly growing fan base. The sound of the Sonder mixtape was this perfect mix of dreamy, atmospheric production combined with Brent's ethereal vocals. There was a dedicated fan base popping up around this side project just as much as with Brent's solo work, although in reality, the line between Sonder music and Brent music was pretty blurry, with D-Pat and Atu working on a lot of the songs that Brent put out around this time as well. But with Sonder and AM Paradox both gaining traction, Brent's fan base was now growing steadily, and Brent and Ty were soon offered even more record deals, all of them more lucrative than before. But now, more than ever, they realized the value of maintaining that independence they still had. Their biggest challenge yet was still right around the corner though. Brent still needed an official, professional, solo debut album. It wouldn't take long for Brent to record his big debut project. Sonder's Son, the 45-minute album that he described as his musical autobiography, would be released just 7 months after Crew became his band.
Chill, bro. Goddamn, shit.
From his hometown,
Every time I move, it got
songwriting Jeff Buckley, Radiohead, Aaliyah, and Lauryn Hill. He said, "It's one of those albums that took a whole lifetime to write. We did it fast, but I think that's because a lot of the inspiration for it was a long time ago. So it was easy to put together a project so quickly when it was a record about my whole introduction." They recorded the entire album during a month-long stay in the Dominican Republic because, according to Brent, being out there brought a different energy than he could find in LA, and that being around people who had nothing made a lot of his own concerns seem insignificant, even to the point that the themes of the album itself changed significantly once he got settled in the DR and started to feel like a lot of the stuff he thought he wanted to include just wasn't that important because of the culture shock he experienced there.
While I was out there, like, I got a chance to really like interact with the people out there, like visit the hood and shit, like, and really see everything that DR had to offer. And it wasn't till like...
But with the cost of professionally recording an album in another country being high, Ty went and spoke to the major labels one last time to ask for a loan to fund the project. When they said no, wanting to sign Brent on for multiple years, he ended up scraping together everything he and Brent could afford to make the album happen as one last Hail Mary. When it came to the cost of logistics, he ended up paying off the Airbnb and flights in installments. And Sonder's Son finally dropped in October of 2017, and by far, it was Brent's best project to date. Sonder's Son is full of sensitive, sprawling R&B songs, interrupted by skits and interludes that tell Brent's personal story. Throughout the album, he covers basically everything I've talked about so far in the video: his bad grades and the tension with his family as a kid, his struggle to survive while looking for success in music. The first song even starts by revisiting his past as a bad student, with a skit where his mom yells at him for failing a class. Obviously, it is an R&B album. There are a bunch of songs about the typical R&B, women, sex, and love, but it's not just that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the variety in the songwriting and the production of the album, all tied together with Brent's vocals, is really nice. For me, I think the standout songs are First World Problems, this song about the pitfalls of modern society and Brent's struggle early on, and then the song So Far Gone, which talked about how Brent feels after leaving his life behind to chase his dreams. Sonder's Son was reviewed positively, being compared by some people to Frank Ocean's Nostalgia Ultra, and a couple of its songs again were later certified platinum, despite the fact that it didn't chart. Basically, Brent was building a cult fan base who would stream and support and come to see him over and over again, even though this early on in his career, he wasn't receiving the marketing push that a major label would typically give to help him reach the charts.
There was a time, like, naturally, where I was like, man, you know, if you could have been a label, you know, I could sign and get the budget, get this and that, but after, like, the struggle months, where, like, niggas finally is, like, got a little bread, we got a platinum record, you know what I mean? We had the project that's doing well. We did a sold-out tour. It's like, why sign to a label now?
It will be 3 more years before Brent's next project, an EP called Fuck the World. On this EP, he leans more into a toxic, hedonistic persona, pushing the boundaries of his lyricism with increasingly explicit themes that weren't really as present in his previous work. Aside from the songwriting, I think the production on this EP is a lot more fun than his previous work.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely enjoy both.
Fuck the World, that was a good ass album. They got shit, Been Away, shit, Trust. It started what's that song called? Matter of fact, I just look it up. Me trying to freaking tell y'all how to do it, man. Y'all looking at me like, man, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you talking about. You just chatting at this point. No. Fuck the what? Fuck the one in the ocean. She got a section. I could sing, but I choose to rap. Yeah, Cloudy, Been Away. Let me know. Rehab one, that was a good one. If you nasty, don't at me. If you nasty, don't at me. I've been working a thing on the blood now. Leave it alone. Oh. Okay, baby. Make It Out. It was a good album too. And then so far after that, bro, all the other songs was actually good. So, to be honest with you.
But on here, you can understand why it's his first work to really hit the mainstream. Saunderson was great, and a lot of the hardcore Brent fans still talk about it being one of his best projects, but it didn't reach the charts at all, while this project, a much shorter EP, peaked at number 20. When you compare the streaming numbers on Saunderson to the streams from F the World, this EP produced a couple of proper hits, taking Brent from someone with niche but strong popularity to someone who has songs that, like, everybody in Gen Z knows. And I think, whereas in the past, his songwriting and aesthetic choices would often be compared to someone like Frank Ocean, known for singing and writing with a sensitive, introspective perspective, but the vibe on this EP would be compared a lot more to early work from The Weeknd or other darker R&B artists, with its themes of nihilistic hedonism and emotional turmoil taking center stage. When talking about his inspirations for the EP, he talks about wanting to take elements from Kurt Cobain, Lil Wayne, and Tupac at the same time. He later described the project like this. He said, F the world like F the negativity. The world's kind of shitty right now. The injustice, the bullshit, it's messed up.
He's right though.
Talking about F the world from the perspective of F the world from an enjoyment perspective. I'm out here getting money, fucking women, all the rock star shit. I like to use the expletive because it means both things. And I think the project's themes of isolation, hedonism, and emotional conflict really did capture that mood of early 2020 really well. I think it wasn't a big shocker when the EP had multiple songs go super viral right after they dropped. Clouded was a song that ended up being a massive hit online, especially on TikTok.
But Clouded is so, bro, that banger, a hella banger, bro.
While Been Away, Summer in London, and Winter in Paris also went.
This the song. This the song right. This the whole song. If you're nasty, I just
industry with the cultural vibe in 2020, F the World wasn't just a double entendre for Brent, but a motto for the world.
I wanted to take the opportunity to fully encompass human emotions. So it's like,
what if you can create your own website by saying, this is what I want? With Wix, you can. First,
fuck the world from the perspective of middle finger, fuck the world, I don't care about
on
nothing.
your Tupac shit.
But also fuck the world from the perspective of lust, you feel me? So fuck the world, like enjoying and indulging in everything that life has to offer. But
Yeah.
taking a step back and seeing how fucked up everything is.
Right.
Like it's like yin and yang, the positive and negative, like the woes and then the woes. You feel?
There are some super atmospheric deep cuts that became cult hits with hypnotic, nocturnal production handled mainly by Deepat and Atu, with help from producers like No ID, the famous mentor of Kanye West. Overall, I think this EP has a much more accessible, catchy sound than Brent's previous work without veering into the big-budget pop sound of something like The Weeknd. And while none of the songs off F the World would reach the Billboard singles chart, 4 out of 10 of these songs would eventually be certified platinum. That's 40% of the album. To me, that's the definition of a cult classic. Brent at the time was a style icon. He was popular online. People were obsessed with his whole aesthetic, and the music was something that his fans were playing over and over and over. I think there was a certain sense of also creative freedom that Brent was able to achieve on this EP. I mean, like Ty said, Saunders' Son made $60,000 just in the first month being out.
All right, little dude did not have to knock them clothes down. He was wrong for that. He had to knock them clothes down like that. Oh man!
Building an independent business model that they didn't.
What the whole time this Brent though on some stuff?
To chart to make a giant pile of cash, but now that they were charting and making hits, the artistic, the personal, the financial freedom was guaranteed. If the Spotify royalty calculators online are accurate, F the World made Brent and Ty close to $10 million just on that platform.
Dang!
Without pocket watching and pointing out just how beneficial the independence would be now that they had achieved it. The artistic freedom they worked so hard to get was theirs. Brent Faiyaz had become a star, and they did it without ever taking a dime from a major label. They didn't have to fill his albums with dozens of filler songs to secure higher chart placements. They weren't being forced to add uninteresting features that no one asked for. All they had to do was release quality music. Following F the World, Brent took a couple years off to craft a project that would be called Wasteland, and this album would be the longest and the biggest he had made yet, diving deep into his struggles with personal vices and the emotional toll of his rising success. And for Brent, writing and recording this album in 2020 and 2021, it was a reaction to the state of the world during COVID, a time when, despite achieving more than ever, he talked about feeling unable to fully enjoy it. And Brent would reach by far the commercial peak of his career so far with Wasteland. Being another fully independent album under his Lost Kids imprint, it dropped in July of 2022, and Wasteland sold 88,000 units in its first week. It debuted at number 2 on the Billboard charts,
album too.
Honestly, it was a once-in-a-generation level of achievement for someone without a major label on their side. And sonically, Wasteland marked a pretty huge shift for Brent, embracing a somehow even darker vibe than his last EP with a much bigger, more cinematic scope as well. And Wasteland would also be the first time that Brent and his team would ever seek out features for a project, with artists like
Look at Tyler. Man, fuck Drake.
Keys, Drake, the Neptunes, and Tyler the Creator all getting verses on the album. And the album overall unfolds like a movie, chronicling this surreal version of Brent's experiences in toxic relationships while navigating fame at the same time. As the narrative progresses, Brent becomes unfaithful to this hypothetical woman he's singing to, and their love story eventually spirals into destruction, with the turning point coming when he discovers that this woman is pregnant only while she threatens to take her own life at the same time. In the album's final interlude, he rushes to be by her side, only to die in a car crash on the way there. With haunting production and beautiful interludes, it's a somber, melancholic masterpiece no matter how you listen to it. The album's theme is toxic R&B, the lyrics are obsessive and dark, the instrumentals are airy and nocturnal, and it's clear that Brent's mental state is just more nihilistic than ever before. And Wasteland was actually such a big hit that a lot of people started to doubt Brent was ever even an independent artist to begin with. Joe Budden is one person who outwardly questioned Brent's status after Wasteland dropped, claiming—
Man, fuck Joe Budden, bitch. He always got to say something old ass. Need that one song.
It really makes sense for Brent to be independent with the sales numbers and the features he was putting up, despite the long history and Brent's own documentation of the different aspects of his business.
Are you still really independent because you got these industry connects? Is that why you had a big first week the way you did? Some people were speculating.
It's actually kind of funny because I've been hearing that, and that's something that I don't even really know how to defend. I'm gonna be honest with you. That's like me walking up to you and be like, "Are you a black man? Like, what the fuck do I say?" Like, what I'm supposed to say? No, you're not. And I'm like, right. Yeah, like, I don't know what to tell you. So for motherfuckers to think that, you feel me, that, or the dispute being independent because you hired people to grow your business, that's kind of flabbergasting.
I'll say it again, but everything that Brent did after Saunders Son and the Sonder Band is really different from the stuff he got big with. Becoming the toxic king of R&B with Fuck the World and Wasteland, that wasn't how he started out. His older songs would be these stories about his life, stories about relationships and love, but over time it did evolve into darker, more complex narratives with themes of fame, toxicity, abusive relationships, emotional turmoil. Some people even say that Brent started to put on a persona to achieve more success over time. And I mean, if you watch interviews with Brent, he doesn't really act in character. For the most part, he comes off like a pretty normal guy. He talks a lot about being an independent artist, his business, his inspirations, his process. He definitely didn't start out writing entire albums about breaking a woman's heart so bad that she kills herself. Nowadays, a lot of people do question, is Brent really like this? Did he sell out for fame? Is he really a toxic guy, or is he just doing it for art? But I think what we should really be asking ourselves is, why do we relate to it so much? And I don't think any of us love listening to Brent Faiyaz really live as horribly as the characters in his songs do, or because any of us think it would really even be okay to be like that, but because his persona and his lyrics can be a cathartic outlet for normal people. I'm personally not going to be someone who cheats on his pregnant girlfriend to the point where she tries to off herself, but anyone who's ever been in any kind of a modern relationship might relate in some way to the way he presents that story.
I wanted it to be jarring. I wanted it to give you a jolt. I wanted it to kind of, I want you to feel that emotion. Like me personally, I feel like that's my goal ultimately. Like as an artist, like what I want to do is make you feel it. Whether or not you like what you feel is a whole nother conversation, but you're gonna feel something.
In a way, I think the character of Brent Faiyaz is someone like Walter White. Walter White resonates because he represents the dark impulses and frustrations that almost everybody harbors but never acts upon. Brent's music allows us to safely explore our own dark side without having to actually do anything bad or hurt other people by relating to his destructive choices. So I think whether or not Brent really moves like the biggest misogynist in the world is kind of irrelevant compared to the fact that his commentary on modern relationships and his emotional struggles resonates with millions of people anyway, with him having one of the most dedicated fan base of any singer right now. And I think the way that he's built such a powerful connection with so many fans says a lot more about how listeners hear exaggerated versions of our own lives reflected in his words rather than how people see him as a person. After Wasteland, Brent's career and legacy were pretty cemented, and in 2022 he launched a new venture, ISO Supremacy, short for In Search of Supremacy, and according to industry insiders, Brent secured a deal worth over $50 million with a well-known independent distributor, United Masters, to help with his new label, solidifying his position as one of the most successful independent artists in music. He also signed
United Masters,
an upcoming artist from Virginia whose song $1 Million Baby would quickly go massively viral and reach over 1 billion streams after signing with ISO Supremacy, making him yet another huge and fully independent artist. Brent also further diversified his independent business, starting his own clothing brand called Nuo on July 4th, 2023, with the acronym standing for Not Unless We Own. Once again, reminding his audience of his belief in ownership and control over his artistic work. Following the formation of Brent's...
Wait, what that shit called? Nuo? Wait. Hold on, I'm about to look that up real quick. Go back.
Over 1 billion streams after signing with ISO Supremacy, making him yet another huge and fully independent artist. Brent also further diversified his independent...
Nuo? Shit, I gotta cop me up. We gotta cop one. Niggas gotta text him. How much you charging for this, guys? I'm trying to, I'm gonna cop me one. Cop me a shirt, probably a couple pairs of shoes, and hats.
With the acronym standing for Not Unless We Own. Once again, reminding his audience and the world of his belief in ownership and control over his artistic work. Following the formation of Brent's creative agency and a $50 million deal with United Masters, Brent surprise dropped a short mixtape in the fall of 2023 called Larger Than Life. It's very obviously a more casual, vibey drop than his previous work, with a pretty fun atmosphere all around. The features, the songwriting, and especially the beats are inspired by the warm, groovy sound of 90s R&B, but then after the success of Larger Than Life, Brent Faiyaz kind of just went away without saying anything. If you scroll through Brent's Instagram page now, the amount of comments calling him out for simply disappearing is overwhelming. He's definitely not gone completely. He's been doing some modeling, he's visible online, he's been doing some shows and a couple of features here and there, but there's been literally no new music from him and not even really any rumors since 2023 with the Larger Than Life mixtape.
You forgot, I think he was chilling with Halle Babe too.
New Instagram
or Haley Babe. Halle
Babe,
whatever.
Faiyaz might be retired. With some really good albums, a ton of cult hits, and a huge fan base, he is probably, I think, one of the top 3 or 4 independent artists that's active right now. Being able to market himself to the point where his Spotify top 10 just looks like 500 million plays, 400 million, 700 million. If he signed to a major label, he would be 3 times bigger. But when you look at what people who reach that level have to go through, it ultimately looks like Brent might be the winner in the end over everybody. Record label contracts have always been some of the most business anywhere. I mean, I already mentioned Taylor Swift and Frank Ocean struggling, but Michael Jackson at the peak of his fame wasn't immune to getting sabotaged by his own label after he spoke up about racism inside the company. And
yeah.
So the truth about selling your soul for fame has less
my fucking favorite artist, #1 on my list.
People can do to each other. When you get into these contracts and business deals, your own life doesn't really belong to you anymore. You can't just do what you want or make what you want, but instead you owe the label a certain level of output and success, and that controls what you're able to do as an artist and a person. You can't just walk away and do your own thing. But Brent Faiyaz isn't even 30 years old yet, and he basically has infinite money from owning all his masters. He never signed anything with a major label, and he doesn't even have any kind of label pushing him in any particular direction creatively. It's the ideal situation that any artist could achieve with their career, and in a lot of ways, I think it's on purpose that the music industry has made it almost impossible for people to get there. But even despite Brent's lifelong obsession with music and his interest in business, that journey wasn't easy, and he paid a price to get where he is. He went through 5 years of hard work with no reward, from the release of Sunset Avenue to him blowing up after he got featured on a Gold Link song in 2017. And then even after that, they basically had to scrape money together for him to record, produce, and release music at the standard of quality he needed to keep growing. It's a journey that a lot of people go on and most people just completely fail at. Not to any fault of their own, but because the industry has always been set up so you can't succeed without having hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars to invest up front in marketing and producing your material. And so Brent Faiyaz's journey is a really, really interesting and unique story about patience, strategy, long-term vision, business. He could have taken the fast track. He could have signed with a major label. It's not like it wasn't offered, because it was multiple times. He could have had a team, a staff, a manager, an agent, and he could have skyrocketed to fame overnight. So I think when you look past the persona of Brent Faiyaz, the toxic R&B guy, you're actually looking at someone who intentionally went and built up this character, built up a business in a very difficult way that gave him a much greater reward than he would have gotten otherwise.
Right.
What he got was the freedom he always wanted. Ever since he was a kid, failing the 9th grade because he wouldn't stop making beats instead of doing his homework, not going to college, getting kicked out of his parents' house at 18 years old, working at the local Dunkin' Donuts while he was trying to save money to go to LA, playing his songs out of the phone speaker, annoying the coworkers, and then even after more years of struggling to finance his career, basically he paid the price and took the much harder road. But in the end now, he can do anything he wants. During the interviews he does, Brent consistently emphasizes one simple but powerful thing, and it's that he always wants the ability to say no to something he doesn't want to do. And I think for us, everybody watching, all the artists, the content creators, I think it's proof that it is possible to achieve your own goals and authentically be yourself on your own terms, right?
Anywho, hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure to comment, subscribe for other social media that did pop up on the screen. See y'all when I see y'all. Later to the bottom of my heart. I'm out. I'm going to roll to 300. And yeah.